Deep in the coal-scarred mountains of eastern Kentucky lies a cavern that has consumed more than 24 lives across nearly a century, yet continues to draw the desperate and the curious into its limestone throat. Devil's Breath Cave earned its name not from superstition, but from the peculiar way sound travels through its passages, whispers that seem to echo from impossible depths, beckoning visitors deeper into chambers that geological surveys insist cannot exist. The first documented disappearance occurred in 1932 when coal prospector James Whitmore descended into what local Cherokee had warned was forbidden ground. Whitmore's journal, recovered 3 days later at the cave entrance, contained increasingly erratic entries describing voices that know my name and passages that rearrange themselves when I'm not looking. His final entry, scrawled in handwriting that bore little resemblance to his earlier precise script, simply read, "They're calling me home. The mountain remembers what I promised it." His body was never found, despite search teams exploring every mapped passage. What made Whitmore's disappearance particularly unsettling was the discovery pattern that would repeat itself for decades to come. Searchers found his equipment arranged in perfect circles at various points throughout the cave, his lantern, pickaxe, and surveying tools positioned with mathematical precision around small pools of what appeared to be coal dust. When analyzed, this substance contained mineral compositions found nowhere else in the region, including trace elements that shouldn't exist in any known geological formation. The cave system itself defies conventional speleological understanding. While the entrance appears modest, a narrow opening in the mountainside partially concealed by mountain laurel, the interior expands into a network of chambers that seem to extend far deeper than the mountain's geology should permit. The Kentucky Geological Survey conducted extensive mapping in 1947, producing charts that showed clear inconsistencies with their own measurements. Passages that registered as extending northeast on morning surveys appeared to run southwest by afternoon, while chambers measured as circular would later present as angular corridors. Dr. Margaret Kellaway, the geologist who led the 1947 expedition, documented these anomalies in her private journal with increasing alarm. "The cave appears to exist in a state of constant flux," she wrote. "Our instruments indicate solid rock where we observed open passages mere hours earlier. Most disturbing is the acoustic phenomenon, voices speaking in harmonious patterns that suggest multiple speakers, yet our team of 6 accounts for every human presence in the system." Dr. Kellaway herself vanished on the final day of the survey, leaving behind only her journal and a curious arrangement of rock samples that formed a perfect spiral pattern at the cave's deepest accessible point. The pattern of disappearances reveals troubling consistencies that challenge rational explanation. Every missing person left behind personal effects arranged in geometric patterns, always near small pools of that unusual coal-black substance. Local search and rescue coordinator Betty Stokes, who supervised recovery efforts from 1955 to 1981, noted that these arrangements became increasingly complex over time. Early on, we'd find maybe 3 or 4 items in a simple triangle or square, she explained in a 1983 interview. By the 70s, we were discovering elaborate patterns involving dozens of objects, belt buckles, pocket watches, eyeglasses, was all positioned with the kind of precision you'd need surveying equipment to achieve. More unsettling was the condition of these objects. Items that should have shown signs of cave moisture or mineral deposits appeared untouched by time, as if they had been placed moments before discovery rather than days or weeks earlier. Wedding rings retained their polish, leather goods showed no signs of moisture damage, and paper items remained crisp and legible despite the cave's humid environment. The Cherokee Nation's historical records, finally made available to researchers in 1975, provided context that local authorities had long ignored. Tribal oral histories spoke of the cave as a place where the boundary between worlds thinned, where ancestral spirits could speak directly to the living. More importantly, they described specific rituals designed to seal the cave's entrance during certain lunar phases, practices that continued well into the 1800s before European settlement disrupted traditional observances. Elder Samuel Raven's account, recorded by anthropologist Dr. Susan Hayes in 1976, proved particularly illuminating. Our grandfathers knew the mountain keeps what is freely given. They said the cave sings to those who carry deep pain, promising relief from their burdens. But relief comes at a price that the living cannot understand until it's too late. Raven's testimony gained credibility when Dr. Hayes herself disappeared during a follow-up interview scheduled inside the cave system. Her recording equipment was found 3 weeks later, arranged in a perfect hexagon around a pool of the mysterious black substance. The recordings contained only her voice, growing progressively more distant, asking questions of someone who never responded audibly. The most extensively documented case occurred in 1968 when the Millstone family, Robert, Sarah, and their twin daughters, vanished during what was intended as a simple spelunking expedition. Unlike previous disappearances, the Millstones had brought extensive photography equipment and maintained radio contact with emergency services throughout their initial descent. The recordings, preserved in county archives, provide the only real-time audio documentation of the cave's effects on visitors. The transmissions begin normally, with Robert Millstone providing regular position reports and describing the cave's unusual acoustic properties. "You can hear your voice echo for almost a full minute," he reports. Sarah says it sounds like a choir responding to every word. By the third hour, subtle changes emerge in their communication patterns. The family begins referencing landmarks they hadn't mentioned before, a chamber with walls covered in something that looks like writing, and passages that feel warmer as you go deeper. Most disturbing is the final transmission, received nearly 6 hours after the family entered the cave. Sarah Millstone's voice, speaking in a tone emergency responders described as unnaturally calm, simply states, "We understand now. The mountain was waiting for us specifically. We know why we came here." The transmission ends with what sounds like multiple voices speaking in unison, though only 4 people had entered the cave. The subsequent search revealed the now familiar pattern: personal effects arranged in increasingly complex geometric patterns, leading deeper into the cave system toward passages that searchers swore hadn't existed during previous surveys. The Millstones' camera equipment was found at 7 different locations, each camera aimed at blank cave walls and containing no exposed film, despite Robert's documented practice of constant photography during spelunking expeditions. Local emergency services gradually developed unofficial protocols for Devil's Breath Cave incidents, though these procedures were never formally adopted due to their apparently supernatural implications. Searches were limited to mapped passages only, with teams strictly forbidden from following any newly discovered openings. Radio contact was maintained at 10-minute intervals, with automatic recall triggered if teams reported hearing voices or discovering unusual mineral formations. Most importantly, searchers were instructed to document but never disturb any arranged objects they encountered. These protocols proved prescient during the 1973 disappearance of geology student Mark Caldwell, whose case provided the most detailed documentation of the cave's anomalous properties. Caldwell had obtained special permission to conduct mineral sampling for his master's thesis, entering the cave with electronic monitoring equipment that recorded environmental data throughout his descent. The recovered data revealed temperature fluctuations that defied physical laws, sudden warming in areas that should have been cool, and acoustic readings that suggested large open spaces in locations where the cave passages measured less than 6 feet wide. Most significantly, Caldwell's seismic equipment detected rhythmic vibrations emanating from depths far below the cave's known extent. The pattern, when analyzed by university researchers, showed characteristics of human heartbeats, not one, but dozens, beating in perfect synchronization. The equipment recorded these signals for 17 hours before falling silent. Caldwell's body was never recovered, but his thesis notes, found arranged in a perfect circle around one of the black substance pools, contained detailed descriptions of cave formations that matched no known geological features in the region. By the 1980s, Devil's Breath Cave had attracted the attention of federal authorities, though official reports remained classified. Local residents reported unmarked vehicles stationed near the cave entrance and personnel conducting tests with equipment they couldn't identify. Former County Sheriff Dale Hutchins, in a 2010 interview conducted shortly before his death, claimed that federal investigators shared their conclusion that the cave represented a geological anomaly with properties that current scientific understanding cannot adequately explain. The most recent documented disappearance occurred in 1995 when paranormal investigators Robert and Linda Chen entered the cave with state-of-the-art video equipment, hoping to document evidence of supernatural activity. Their footage, recovered after a month-long search, shows normal cave exploration for the first several hours. However, the final recorded segments reveal increasingly bizarre phenomena. Passages that appear to extend infinitely beyond the reach of their powerful lights, sounds of multiple conversations echoing from empty chambers, and walls that seem to shift and reshape when viewed through the camera lens. The Chen's final video segment, lasting only 3 minutes, shows them standing in a vast chamber that appears nowhere in any geological survey. The space is filled with dozens of personal objects, clothing, jewelry, tools, photographs, arranged in complex patterns that extend beyond the camera's range. Linda Chen's voice, barely audible above what sounds like distant singing, whispers, "They're all here, everyone who ever came looking for something they lost. The mountain keeps them safe." Today, Devil's Breath, the cave remains officially open to the public, though access requires permits and mandatory safety briefings that strongly discourage exploration beyond the first chamber. Local outfitters refuse to guide expeditions into the deeper passages, and experienced cavers from throughout Appalachia share informal warnings about the site's unusual characteristics. The cave entrance itself has become a pilgrimage site of sorts for those dealing with profound loss, drawn by persistent legends that suggest the missing aren't truly gone, merely dwelling in chambers beneath the mountain where pain transforms into something else entirely. Recent geological surveys continue to document the cave's shifting internal structure, with new passages appearing and familiar routes vanishing according to no discernible pattern. Ground penetrating radar indicates the presence of vast empty spaces deep beneath the mountain, chambers large enough to hold entire communities. Most disturbing of all, sensitive audio equipment occasionally detects what researchers describe as organized human activity emanating from these depths: voices, footsteps, and sounds of purposeful movement from areas that should be solid stone. The mountain keeps its secrets well, and Devil's Breath Cave continues to call to those who carry burdens too heavy for the surface world. Whether the missing have found the peace they sought or something else entirely remains one of Appalachia's most enduring mysteries. What is certain is that the cave remembers every soul who has entered seeking answers, and in the endless chambers beneath the mountain, perhaps those answers wait in forms the living mind cannot comprehend. In the mountainous terrain of Pocahontas County, West Virginia, lies a limestone cavern that has claimed 11 documented lives across nearly 8 decades, yet continues to draw researchers, spelunkers, and the desperately curious into its shadowed depths. The Shepherd's Gate Cave, named for the peculiar rock formation that frames its entrance like a cathedral arch, represents one of Appalachia's most enduring mysteries, a place where the documented disappearances follow patterns so precise they seem almost choreographed. The first recorded vanishing occurred on October 31st, 1943, when 3 members of the West Virginia Geological Survey entered the cave system for what was intended as a routine mapping expedition. Dr. Harrison Whitmore, lead geologist, had specifically requested this assignment after reviewing preliminary reports that described acoustic anomalies and structural impossibilities within the cave's deeper chambers. His team consisted of surveyor James Mitchell and photographer Robert Chen, both experienced in underground documentation work. The expedition began at precisely 9 a.m. with full equipment loads, including surveying instruments, photographic apparatus, and sufficient provisions for a 3-day exploration. Their planned route would take them through the main chamber system, following an underground stream that local Cherokee oral histories described as the path to the place where voices gather. Radio contact was maintained for the first 6 hours, with regular reports describing standard limestone formations and typical cave conditions. Dr. Whitmore's final transmission, recorded at 3:17 p.m., marked the beginning of what investigators would later classify as an ongoing phenomenon rather than an isolated incident. His voice, according to the radio operator's log, remained calm and professional, despite describing observations that challenged geological understanding. "We've encountered a chamber that appears to extend far beyond our lighting capacity," he reported. "The acoustic properties suggest a space of impossible dimensions. James has begun measuring, but his equipment is providing contradictory readings." The transmission continued for another 2 minutes, during which Whitmore described finding photographs scattered on the cave floor, professional quality images of our expedition, though we haven't yet used the camera. His final words, preserved in county records, were, "The photographs show us deeper in the cave than we've traveled." Robert is examining them now. They appear to be taken from angles and positions that would require the photographer to be standing in solid rock. Search teams reached the cave within hours of losing contact, but found no trace of the expedition beyond their abandoned equipment, arranged in a perfect triangle at the cave's entrance. Most unsettling was the discovery of a complete set of photographic plates, developed and fixed, showing the missing team in chambers that the search parties couldn't locate despite extensive exploration. The cave system itself defied conventional speleological categorization. While the entrance chamber appeared modest, with typical limestone formations and a small underground stream, subsequent surveys consistently documented passages that seemed to reconfigure themselves between visits. The Kentucky Geological Survey conducted 5 separate mapping expeditions between 1944 and 1952, producing charts that bore no resemblance to one another, despite using identical methodologies and equipment. Dr. Margaret Kellaway, who led the 1947 expedition, documented these inconsistencies with scientific rigor that made her conclusions all the more disturbing. The cave exhibits properties that suggest a dynamic structure, she wrote in her classified report. Passages that registered as extending northeast during morning surveys appeared to terminate in solid rock by afternoon. Most concerning is the discovery of survey markers placed by previous expeditions in locations that our maps indicate should be inaccessible, solid limestone. The pattern of disappearances that followed Dr. Whitmore's expedition revealed troubling consistencies. Every missing person left behind personal effects arranged in geometric patterns near the cave entrance, triangles, pentagrams, and more complex configurations that seemed to grow more elaborate with each incident. Items were invariably found in pristine condition despite the cave's humid environment, arranged with mathematical precision that suggested deliberate placement rather than random abandonment. Local folklore, preserved through oral traditions of both European settlers and Cherokee tribes, provided context that scientific investigation consistently overlooked. Elder Samuel Raven, interviewed by anthropologist Dr. Susan Hayes in 1951, described the cave as a place where the boundary between the world of the living and the realm of spirits grows thin during certain lunar phases. According to tribal tradition, the cave had been sealed periodically using rituals designed to keep the voices from calling too loudly. Dr. Hayes herself became part of the cave's dark legacy when she disappeared during a follow-up interview scheduled inside the cave system in 1952. Her recording equipment was recovered 3 weeks later, arranged in a perfect hexagon around a small pool of water that reflected not the cave ceiling above, but what appeared to be an open sky. The recordings contained only her voice, growing progressively more distant, conducting an interview with someone who never responded audibly. The most extensively documented case occurred in 1961 when the Princeton family, Robert, Sarah, and their 12-year-old daughter Amy, vanished during what local newspapers described as a family spelunking expedition. Unlike previous disappearances, The Princetons had maintained radio contact with emergency services throughout their descent, providing real-time documentation of the cave's effects on visitors. The transmissions, preserved in county archives, begin with standard exploration reports, temperature readings, passage descriptions, and routine safety checks. However, by the third hour underground, subtle changes emerge in their communication patterns. Robert Princeton begins referencing landmarks his family hasn't mentioned before, chambers with walls covered in symbols that look like writing, and passages that feel warm despite the depth. Most disturbing is the family's description of finding their own equipment in chambers they claim not to have visited. Sarah's flashlight is here, Robert reports in his fourth-hour transmission, sitting on a rock shelf, but she's standing right next to me with her flashlight. The recordings capture Sarah's voice, confirming that she still possesses her equipment, suggesting they had discovered duplicate items that shouldn't exist. The Princeton family's final transmission, received at 6:23 p.m., consists of Amy's voice speaking in a tone that emergency responders described as unnaturally calm for a child her age. "We understand now," she says clearly. "The cave keeps what it needs. We've been walking in circles, but the circles are getting smaller. We can see ourselves coming from behind." Subsequent search operations revealed the now familiar pattern. Personal effects arranged in geometric configurations, leading deeper into the cave system toward passages that seem to appear and disappear according to no discernible logic. The Princeton family's camera equipment was found at multiple locations throughout the cave, each camera loaded with film that, when developed, showed identical images of empty cave chambers taken from impossible angles. The 1970s brought increased government attention to Shepherd's Gate Cave after reports reached federal authorities describing electromagnetic anomalies and gravitational inconsistencies within the cave system. A joint expedition involving personnel from the U.S. Geological Survey, the Department of Defense, and an unnamed federal agency conducted a month-long investigation that resulted in the cave being declared a restricted area under the National Defense Authorization Act. The classified report from this investigation, partially declassified in 1995 under FOIA requests, describes phenomena that challenge fundamental understanding of physics and geology. Ground-penetrating radar detected vast chambers extending far deeper than the mountain's elevation should permit. Most concerning was the discovery of what the report terms organized material signatures in these deep chambers, patterns that suggested large quantities of metallic objects arranged in systematic configurations. Acoustic testing revealed properties that defied explanation. Sound waves directed into the cave's depths produced echoes that returned from directions indicating impossible spatial orientations. Some echoes returned before the original sounds were produced, while others seemed to originate from locations that instruments confirmed contained solid rock. The most unsettling finding was the detection of organized sound patterns, rhythmic sequences that resembled human communication, despite originating from areas confirmed to be empty. The last documented disappearance occurred in 1987 when cave photographer Michael Chen entered Shepherd's Gate Cave alone, hoping to document evidence of the phenomena that had claimed his grandfather Robert in the 1943 expedition. Chen carried state-of-the-art photographic equipment and maintained regular radio contact for the first 4 hours of his exploration. His final transmission described finding a chamber filled with photographic equipment spanning decades, cameras, tripods, and lighting apparatus from every era of the cave's documented history. "It's like a museum of lost expeditions," Chen reported. "I can see grandfather's camera, the one they never found. But there are others here too, equipment that looks more modern than anything I brought." His transmission cut off mid-sentence, as he apparently discovered something that left him speechless. When radio contact resumed 30 seconds later, Chen's voice carried a note of resignation that chilled emergency personnel. "I understand now. The cave doesn't take people, it collects them, and we've all been here before." Chen's equipment was found the following day, arranged in a complex spiral pattern around a pool of water that reflected images of caves' chambers not found in any survey. Most significantly, his cameras contained film showing every missing expedition from the cave's history, photographed from perspectives that would require the photographer to be standing in multiple locations simultaneously. Recent technological advances have allowed researchers to conduct remote investigations of Shepherd's Gate Cave without human entry. Robotic probes equipped with advanced sensors have confirmed many of the anomalies reported by previous expeditions while revealing new mysteries. The cave system appears to extend far deeper than geological surveys indicate possible, with chambers that register as both empty and filled, depending on the type of sensor used. Most disturbing are the thermal imaging results that show heat signatures consistent with human presence in areas confirmed to be inaccessible. These signatures appear in patterns suggesting organized movement, formations that look like groups of people walking in precise formations through chambers that should be empty. The heat signatures move according to schedules that correspond to the dates and times of historical disappearances, as if the missing expeditions continue their explorations in spaces that exist parallel to our own. Today, Shepherd's Gate Cave remains officially closed to public access, surrounded by federal restrictions that local authorities strictly enforce. However, the cave continues to draw attention from those seeking answers to unsolved disappearances or hoping to document evidence of phenomena that challenge conventional understanding. Park rangers report regular incidents of hikers found near the cave entrance in states of confusion, claiming to have heard voices calling their names from the darkness within. The cave's influence appears to extend beyond its physical boundaries. Local residents describe dreams of underground chambers filled with the equipment and personal effects of every expedition that has entered the cave. In these dreams, they report seeing the missing individuals continuing their explorations in vast underground cities that exist in spaces too large for the mountain to contain. Most disturbing are accounts of dreamers recognizing their own faces among the missing, suggesting that the cave's influence transcends temporal boundaries. Whether Shepherd's Gate Cave represents a geological anomaly with properties that current science cannot explain, or something far stranger, remains a question that has consumed researchers for 8 decades. What is certain is that the mountain keeps its secrets well, and those who venture into its depths in search of answers often find more than they bargained for. Discoveries that suggest some mysteries are meant to remain forever beyond human understanding. In the limestone karst regions of eastern Kentucky, Beneath a ridge system, known locally as Shepherd's Backbone, lies a cave that has systematically consumed 14 documented expeditions across the span of 93 years. The geological formation, designated officially as Cave System KY447, but referenced in regional folklore as the Bone Collector, represents one of the most comprehensively documented, yet persistently inexplicable, disappearance sites in North American speleological records. The initial recorded incident occurred on November 17, 1931, when Dr. Harrison Whitfield, a geologist from the University of Kentucky, entered the cave system with his graduate assistant Thomas Chen and local guide Samuel Morrison. Their expedition, intended as a routine geological survey for potential mineral deposits, was equipped with state-of-the-art mapping equipment and sufficient provisions for a 3-day exploration. Radio contact was maintained for approximately 4 hours before communications abruptly terminated at 2:47 p.m. The cave system itself presents numerous geological anomalies that have confounded researchers for decades. Initial surveys indicated a relatively modest network of limestone chambers extending approximately 800 meters into the ridge. However, subsequent expeditions consistently documented passages that appeared to extend far beyond these original measurements, with some teams reporting travel distances that exceeded the physical dimensions of the mountain itself. More disturbing were the acoustic properties observed within the system, sounds that seemed to originate from impossible directions and echoes that returned from chambers that mapping efforts could never locate. Dr. Whitfield's expedition established a pattern that would persist through subsequent disappearances. Personal equipment was discovered arranged in precise geometric configurations at various points throughout the cave system, positioned with mathematical accuracy that suggested deliberate placement rather than accidental abandonment. Items were found in locations that required technical climbing skills to access, yet no ropes or climbing equipment were ever recovered. Most unsettling was the condition of these artifacts. Despite the cave's humid environment and mineral-rich atmosphere, objects showed no signs of corrosion or decay, appearing as though they had been placed moments before discovery. The geological characteristics of the cave defied conventional speleological understanding. Ground-penetrating radar conducted in 1953 detected vast hollow spaces extending deep beneath the ridge system, yet physical exploration consistently failed to locate these chambers. Temperature readings fluctuated according to no discernible pattern, with some passages maintaining year-round temperatures that varied by as much as 30 degrees Fahrenheit within distances of mere meters. Water sources within the cave exhibited unusual chemical compositions, containing mineral concentrations that had no geological explanation based on the surrounding limestone formations. Local Cherokee oral traditions, documented by anthropologist Dr. Margaret Hayes in 1938, described the cave as a place where the mountain remembers what it has swallowed. According to these accounts, tribal members had deliberately avoided the area for generations, considering it a threshold between the physical and spiritual worlds. The Cherokee name for the location translated roughly to the place where echoes live forever, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of the cave's unusual acoustic properties centuries before scientific documentation began. The second major disappearance occurred in 1943 when a team of military cartographers, led by Colonel James Morrison, the son of the original guide Samuel Morrison, entered the cave system as part of a classified wartime geological survey. The team of 6 experienced surveyors maintained radio contact for 7 hours before their final transmission described discovering chambers that shouldn't exist according to our preliminary surveys. The recording, preserved in military archives, captures Colonel Morrison's increasingly agitated voice, describing passages that seem to reconfigure themselves between visits and surveying equipment that produced contradictory readings. What distinguished this incident was the recovery of photographic evidence. The team's cameras were found 3 weeks later, arranged in a perfect hexagon around a small underground pool. When developed, the film contained images of cave formations that matched no known geological features in the region. More disturbing were photographs that appeared to be taken from perspectives that would require the photographer to be standing in solid rock. Some images showed the missing team members in chambers that search parties could never locate, despite extensive exploration efforts. By 1957, the cave had attracted the attention of federal authorities following reports of electromagnetic anomalies and gravitational inconsistencies filed by successive geological surveys. A joint investigation involving personnel from the United States Geological Survey and an unnamed federal agency resulted in the cave being temporarily sealed. Declassified documents from this period describe phenomena that challenged fundamental understanding of physics and geology, including magnetic readings that indicated the presence of metallic masses far beneath the cave system and seismic activity that suggested vast underground movements occurring at depths that should have been solid bedrock. The pattern of disappearances revealed troubling consistencies that transcended individual expeditions. Every missing team left behind personal effects arranged in increasingly complex geometric patterns with configurations that seemed to grow more elaborate with each incident. The mathematical precision of these arrangements suggested not random abandonment, but deliberate artistic expression, as though the missing individuals had been compelled to create these displays before their final disappearance. More unsettling was the discovery of what researchers termed temporal artifacts, objects that appeared to have been modified or combined in ways that required tools and techniques not available during the periods when the expeditions occurred. Items from the 1931 expedition were found altered with precision cutting that suggested industrial equipment not invented until decades later. Metal components showed signs of molecular level manipulation that contemporary science could not explain. The psychological effects experienced by those who entered the cave but managed to return became a subject of extensive study. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a psychiatrist who interviewed survivors from failed expeditions, documented a consistent pattern of temporal disorientation and memory gaps. Subjects consistently reported experiences of extended duration underground, describing days or weeks of exploration, despite being missing for only hours according to external timekeeping. Many exhibited knowledge of cave systems and geological formations they could not have encountered during their documented periods in the cave. Most disturbing were the recovered journals and field notes that detailed encounters with other expeditions that did not correspond to any known groups. Multiple teams reported meeting and conversing with explorers who claimed to be from expeditions that had entered the cave years or even decades earlier. These accounts described individuals who appeared unchanged by time, maintaining knowledge of historical events up to the point of their disappearance, but possessing no awareness of subsequent decades. The cave's influence appeared to extend beyond its physical boundaries. Geological surveys of the surrounding area consistently detected underground movement patterns that suggested a vast network of connected chambers extending throughout the ridge system. Local residents reported dreams of underground exploration and experiences of being called toward the cave entrance during specific lunar phases. Several families relocated from the area, describing an overwhelming compulsion to enter the cave that intensified with prolonged exposure to the region. By the 1970s, the cave had become the subject of international scientific interest, attracting researchers from universities worldwide. However, these expeditions uniformly failed to produce meaningful data, with equipment malfunctioning and teams reporting experiences that could not be objectively documented. The cave seemed to resist scientific inquiry, producing different results for identical experiments and measurements that varied according to no discernible pattern. The most recent documented disappearance occurred in 1995 when Dr. Sarah Chen, granddaughter of the original expedition member Thomas Chen, entered the cave with advanced digital monitoring equipment. Her expedition was tracked via satellite communication and real-time telemetry systems. For the first time, researchers maintained continuous contact with an exploration team throughout their descent into the cave system. Dr. Chen's transmitted data revealed impossible spatial configurations and environmental readings that contradicted the known laws of physics. Her equipment detected atmospheric pressures that suggested vast open spaces where geological surveys indicated solid rock. Most significantly, her digital cameras captured images of previous expeditions, apparently still active within the cave system. The final transmission showed figures that matched photographic records of teams that had disappeared decades earlier, appearing unchanged and engaged in continuous exploration activities. The cave entrance was permanently sealed following Dr. Chen's disappearance, with the site declared a federal restricted area. However, seismic monitoring equipment continues to detect organized activity within the sealed system. Ground-penetrating radar occasionally registers heat signatures consistent with human presence in areas that should be inaccessible. These signatures move in coordinated patterns that suggest group activities and purposeful exploration, as though the missing expeditions continue their research in spaces that exist parallel to conventional reality. Current atmospheric monitoring detects periodic acoustic anomalies emanating from the sealed cave system, rhythmic patterns that resemble human communication but cannot be decoded using any known linguistic frameworks. These sounds occur at regular intervals that correspond to the dates of historical disappearances, suggesting that whatever process claims, explorers operates according to temporal cycles that transcend conventional understanding of time and space. The cave remains under federal observation, officially classified as a geological hazard site. However, the true nature of the phenomena documented within its depths continues to elude scientific explanation. Whether the cave represents a natural geological anomaly with properties beyond current scientific understanding, or something far more fundamental to the nature of reality itself, remains one of the most enduring mysteries in American speleological research. The mountain keeps its secrets well, and those who venture into its depths seeking answers often discover that some questions are too dangerous to ask. In the limestone darkness beneath Shepherd's Backbone, time flows differently, space bends according to unknown rules, and the missing continue their eternal exploration of chambers that exist beyond the boundaries of the world we think we understand. The Geological Survey maps of Pendleton County, West Virginia, contain a curious notation that few researchers have ever questioned. Surveyor missing, area incomplete, marked beside a cave system designated only as PEN 47. The notation dates to 1923, when geological surveyor Marcus Webb entered what locals called Devil's Throat Cave and simply never emerged. His disappearance marked the beginning of a pattern that would span nearly a century, claiming 17 documented victims who walked into those limestone passages and vanished without explanation. The cave itself presents no obvious dangers to experienced spelunkers. Located in the Monongahela National Forest, Devil's Throat consists of a main chamber approximately 40 feet wide, with 3 clearly marked passages extending deeper into the mountain. The entrance, positioned on the southeastern face of Spruce Mountain, remains easily accessible year-round. State geological reports describe the formation as stable, with no evidence of sudden collapses, underground rivers, or toxic gas accumulations that might explain the disappearances. What makes these vanishings particularly disturbing is their methodical nature. Each victim entered the cave alone, despite clear warnings posted at the entrance since 1954. Each left behind personal belongings at the cave mouth, as if deliberately preparing for a journey that required no earthly possessions. Most unsettling of all, each disappearance occurred during the last week of October, always between the hours of midnight and dawn. The first documented case after Webb involved a young geology student from West Virginia University. Sarah Hendricks, age 22, had spent 3 days mapping the accessible portions of Devil's Throat in October 1931 as part of her senior thesis. Her research notes, discovered scattered around the cave entrance, revealed a growing obsession with what she termed acoustic anomalies in the deepest accessible chamber. Her final entry, written in increasingly erratic handwriting, described hearing conversations echoing from beneath the floor, speaking in harmonies no human throat could produce. Hendricks's disappearance prompted the first official investigation, led by State Police Detective Raymond Collins. His report, filed in November 1931, documented several peculiarities that would become recurring themes in subsequent cases. Hendricks's camping equipment remained neatly arranged outside the cave, but her spelunking gear was found abandoned just inside the entrance. Most puzzling was the condition of her rope, 75 feet of climbing line that had been carefully cut into precisely equal 12-inch segments and arranged in a perfect spiral pattern on the cave floor. The investigation revealed that local residents had avoided Devil's Throat for generations, though their reasons varied depending on who was asked. Cherokee oral traditions, recorded by ethnologist James Morrison in 1898, described the area as a mouth that feeds the sleepers below. European settlers had their own warnings, passed down through families who'd lived in the region since the 1700s. They spoke of voices that called from the cave during certain nights, voices that sounded like lost family members pleading for help. Detective Collins spent 4 days exploring the cave system with professional spelunkers from the National Speleological Society. Their expedition mapped passages extending nearly 2 miles into the mountain, discovering several chambers large enough to house entire buildings. In the deepest accessible room, approximately 400 feet from the entrance, they found evidence that someone had been living in the cave for an extended period. Personal items dating back decades were arranged in neat piles against the walls: clothing, jewelry, eyeglasses, and dozens of journals filled with increasingly illegible handwriting. The journals presented a disturbing pattern. Each began with mundane observations about cave geology or personal matters, but gradually devolved into descriptions of voices, visions, and an overwhelming compulsion to venture deeper into unexplored passages. The final entries in each journal invariably mentioned a calling that grew stronger with each passing day, described as both beautiful and irresistible. Collins' investigation ended abruptly when his partner, Officer Michael Torres, disappeared during their final survey of the cave. Torres had been standing guard at the entrance, while Collins and the spelunkers explored a newly discovered passage. When the team returned after 3 hours, Torres was gone. His service revolver lay on the ground beside a note written in his handwriting. "I understand now. The voices aren't coming from below, they're coming from home." The cave was officially closed to public access in 1932, though the barriers proved ineffective. Every few years, someone would ignore the warnings and venture inside. The pattern remained consistent: lone individuals, always in late October, always leaving behind evidence of careful preparation, but taking nothing with them into the depths. In 1955, the disappearance of Dr. Elizabeth Morrison brought renewed scientific attention to Devil's Throat. Morrison, a respected psychologist studying mass hysteria in isolated communities, had been investigating the cave as part of her research into shared delusions. Her colleagues at Johns Hopkins University became concerned when she stopped responding to telegrams during what was supposed to be a 3-day field study. Morrison's research materials, discovered at the cave entrance, revealed the most systematic analysis of the phenomenon to date. She had interviewed 37 local residents about their experiences with Devil's Throat, documenting accounts that showed remarkable consistency despite coming from people who claimed never to have discussed the cave with others. Nearly every interview subject reported hearing voices from the cave during the last week of October, voices that grew clearer and more persuasive each year. Most compelling was Morrison's acoustic analysis of the cave system. Using primitive recording equipment, she had documented sounds emanating from passages too narrow for human exploration. The recordings, later analyzed by audio specialists at the Smithsonian Institution, revealed rhythmic patterns that resembled human speech but contained frequencies beyond the normal range of human vocal cords. More disturbing was the discovery that these sounds seemed to respond to human presence, growing louder and more complex when people approached the deeper chambers. Morrison's final journal entry, dated October 23, 1955, described an experience that defied rational explanation. The voices are not speaking to me, they are speaking through me. I find myself responding to questions I haven't heard, providing answers to problems I don't understand. The acoustic properties of this cave are unlike anything in the geological literature. Sound doesn't echo here, it harmonizes, building upon itself until individual voices become a chorus. I am beginning to understand why people feel compelled to seek the source. The 1960s brought technological advances that enabled more sophisticated investigation of Devil's Throat. A joint expedition by the U.S. Geological Survey and Carnegie Mellon University's Acoustics Department attempted to map the complete cave system using sonar and early computerized analysis. The team, led by Dr. Robert Ainsworth, discovered that the cave extended far deeper than previously known, with passages descending nearly half a mile into the mountain. The expedition's most significant finding was the existence of chambers that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Sonar readings indicated rooms larger than the mountain itself could contain, spaces where sound waves simply vanished without reflection. More puzzling were the acoustic measurements taken in these impossible chambers. Audio equipment registered human voices speaking in conversation, despite the fact that the nearest passage wide enough for human access terminated hundreds of feet away. Dr. Ainsworth documented these anomalies in a classified report that wouldn't be declassified until 1995. His team had identified what they termed acoustic portals, areas where sound seemed to pass through solid rock as if it were empty air. Voices recorded in these locations spoke in languages that linguists at Georgetown University couldn't identify, though phonetic analysis suggested they might be extremely archaic dialects of Cherokee or other indigenous languages. The expedition ended when graduate student Thomas Bradley disappeared during the final day of research. Bradley had been monitoring recording equipment in the cave's main chamber when his colleagues heard him respond to someone calling his name. When they investigated, they found only his headphones and a notebook containing a single repeated phrase written 127 times. They remember everything we've forgotten. By the 1970s, Devil's Throat had gained notoriety in paranormal research circles, attracting investigators from universities across the country. Most returned with standard reports of unusual acoustics and psychological effects associated with isolation and darkness. However, 3 separate teams from different institutions documented identical phenomena that couldn't be explained by conventional cave science. Each team reported discovering carved symbols in the deepest accessible chambers, symbols that appeared to be recently created despite being carved into rock that geological analysis showed to be hundreds of thousands of years old. The symbols themselves bore no resemblance to any known writing system, though anthropologists noted similarities to geometric patterns found in certain Native American petroglyphs associated with burial sites and territorial warnings. More disturbing was the discovery that these symbols seemed to change between visits. Photography revealed that carvings documented by one team would be missing when subsequent expeditions arrived, replaced by entirely different markings in new locations. Underground mapping became impossible because passages that were carefully surveyed and documented would be found to terminate in solid rock when teams returned to verify their measurements. The most recent disappearance occurred in October 2019 when urban explorer David Chen entered Devil's Throat while live streaming his exploration on social media. Chen's live feed, viewed by over 15,000 people, provided the first real-time documentation of the phenomena that had claimed so many victims. For the first 40 minutes of his stream, Chen's exploration proceeded normally. He narrated his progress through familiar passages, pointing out formations, and sharing technical details about cave photography. However, approximately 800 feet from the entrance, his commentary began to change. Viewers noted that Chen started responding to voices that his microphone didn't pick up, engaging in conversations with unseen speakers. The final 12 minutes of Chen's stream showed him moving through passages that previous surveys had identified as dead ends. Somehow, these formerly blocked routes now led to chambers that appeared much larger than the mountain could contain. Chen's excitement grew as he described architectural features that were clearly artificial: carved walls, symmetrical chambers, and what he called rooms that sing with perfect acoustics. The stream ended abruptly when Chen announced he had found the source of all the voices. His final words, clearly audible to thousands of viewers, were, "They're not calling people into the cave, they're calling them home." Recovery teams found Chen's streaming equipment at the entrance to Devil's Throat, arranged in the same careful pattern that had characterized every previous disappearance. His camera contained 12 hours of footage, but the final 20 minutes showed only darkness and recorded only silence. Analysis of the video files revealed that they had been corrupted in a way that digital forensics experts described as impossible, as if the data had been selectively edited to remove specific audio and visual information while leaving the file structure intact. Today, Devil's Throat remains sealed behind steel barriers and warning signs that few people ever see. The Forest Service maintains that the cave poses geological hazards, though their official closure order cites only unstable formations and dangerous gas pockets. The real reason for the permanent closure remains classified in files that describe phenomena the government prefers not to acknowledge. Local residents continue to report voices echoing from the sealed cave entrance during the last week of October, voices that seem to know the names of anyone who listens too closely. Emergency services receive several calls each year from hikers who claim to hear family members calling for help from inside the mountain, though rescue teams invariably find no signs of distress and no evidence that anyone has breached the security barriers. Perhaps most unsettling is the discovery made by geological surveys using ground-penetrating radar in 2021. The technology revealed that Devil's Throat cave system continues to expand, with new passages appearing where none existed in previous surveys. The cave seems to be growing, reaching deeper into the mountain and extending closer to nearby communities. The 17 people who entered Devil's Throat and vanished left behind families, careers, and lives that continued without them. Yet those familiar with the case files note a disturbing consistency in the testimony of witnesses who knew the victims well. Without exception, family members and close friends report having conversations with the missing persons that occurred after their documented disappearances, phone calls, chance encounters, and extended visits that seemed perfectly normal until they realized that the person they were speaking with had been missing for years. These accounts, officially dismissed as grief induced hallucinations or false memories, suggest something far more troubling than simple disappearance. They point to the possibility that those who enter Devil's Throat don't simply vanish. They return, but not in ways that living minds can properly comprehend or remember. Deep within the limestone formations of Greenbrier County, West Virginia, lies a geological anomaly that has claimed 17 documented lives over the past century and a half. The cave system, known locally as Endless Echo, presents no obvious hazards to experienced spelunkers, yet those who venture into its depths during specific atmospheric conditions have consistently vanished without explanation, leaving behind only their equipment and an increasingly disturbing pattern of evidence. The cave itself sits at the base of Whispering Ridge, a formation that geological surveys from the 1890s described as acoustically irregular due to unusual sound propagation properties that made normal conversation impossible at distances exceeding 50 feet. The entrance, a modest opening roughly 8 feet in diameter, descends at a gentle angle through well-formed limestone passages that early explorers found remarkably stable and safe. What distinguishes Endless Echo from thousands of similar cave systems throughout Appalachia is not its physical structure, but rather the meteorological conditions that seem to trigger its deadly influence. Every documented disappearance has occurred during periods of atmospheric pressure below 29.80 inches of mercury, typically coinciding with approaching storm systems that create specific barometric conditions. Local weather stations have recorded that when pressure drops below this threshold, the cave begins to produce what residents describe as the calling, a low-frequency acoustic phenomenon that seems to originate from passages extending far deeper than any survey has successfully mapped. The first recorded disappearance dates to October 1874, when geological surveyor Edmund Hartwell entered the cave system to map what he believed were previously unexplored chambers. Hartwell, an experienced professional who had mapped over 300 cave systems throughout Virginia and West Virginia, was commissioned by the State Geological Survey to document the cave's extent and assess its potential for commercial limestone extraction. Hartwell's field notes, discovered at the cave entrance 3 days after his disappearance, reveal an increasingly obsessive focus on acoustic anomalies within the system. His initial entries describe standard geological observations, rock formations, chamber dimensions, and structural stability assessments. However, by the third day of his survey, his handwriting becomes erratic and his observations shift dramatically. The stone itself seems to breathe, reads one entry dated October 15th, 1874. Sound does not behave as expected in these chambers. Voices carry from passages that my measurements indicate should be physically impossible. I have heard conversations in languages I cannot identify, emanating from solid rock faces. The compass spins uselessly in the deeper chambers, and my lantern flame burns with an unusual blue tint that provides insufficient illumination. Most disturbing was Hartwell's final entry, written in increasingly unsteady handwriting. I understand now why the local Cherokee avoided this place. The cave does not simply exist in our world, it exists between worlds. Something calls from below, and the sound grows more beautiful with each passing hour. I find myself reluctant to leave, though my logical mind recognizes this as dangerous thinking. The surveying equipment shows chambers extending beyond what the mountain could physically contain. Tomorrow, I will follow the deepest passage to its source. Hartwell's surveying equipment was found precisely arranged at the cave entrance, despite the fact that he had been working nearly half a mile into the system. His transit and measuring chains were placed in perfect geometric patterns that bore no resemblance to standard surveying practices. Most puzzling was the discovery that his notes contained detailed measurements of passages that subsequent explorations found to be completely absent from the cave system. The second documented case occurred in 1892 when three members of the newly formed West Virginia Speleological Society attempted to verify Hartwell's measurements. The team, led by Dr. Marcus Webb of the University of Charleston, brought advanced equipment for their era, including early photographic apparatus and precisely calibrated barometric instruments designed to document the atmospheric anomalies that local residents had reported. Dr. Webb's team established a base camp at the cave entrance and maintained regular communication with colleagues who remained outside. For 4 days, they documented their progress through a system of coded bell signals, with team members checking in every 2 hours as they explored progressively deeper into the cave system. The expedition's photographer, James Morrison, left behind a collection of glass plate negatives that present some of the most compelling evidence of the cave's anomalous properties. When developed, Morrison's photographs showed chambers and passages that appeared far larger than the mountain's known dimensions could accommodate. More disturbing were images that seemed to show structures within the cave, worked stone surfaces, and carved symbols that suggested artificial construction, despite the passages being formed entirely through natural limestone erosion. Most unsettling was Morrison's final photograph, taken with a magnesium flash in what he identified as the deepest accessible chamber. The image shows what appears to be a vast underground amphitheater with carved stone seating arranged in concentric circles around a central depression. Geological analysis has since confirmed that such a chamber could not exist at that location without the mountain's complete structural collapse. Dr. Webb's final journal entry, discovered along with all the team's equipment at the cave entrance, described experiences that challenged his scientific worldview. The atmospheric readings defy explanation, he wrote. Barometric pressure fluctuates wildly within the cave system, creating pockets where our instruments register readings that should be physically impossible at this elevation. More troubling are the acoustic phenomena. We have recorded voices speaking in what Morrison believes may be archaic Cherokee dialects, though the words seem to come from the stone itself rather than any identifiable source. Webb's most significant observation concerned what he termed temporal distortions within the cave system. His team's chronometers, which had been carefully synchronized before entering the cave, began showing different times after the first day underground. By the third day, the variance had reached over 4 hours, with team members experiencing different rates of time passage despite remaining together throughout their exploration. Morrison insists that we have been underground for 3 days, Webb wrote, but my pocket watch indicates only 18 hours have passed since we entered. Conversely, our base camp signals suggest we have been out of contact for nearly a week. The cave seems to exist in its own temporal framework, following rules that our science cannot explain. The expedition ended when Dr. Webb's team failed to respond to scheduled signals from their support crew. Rescue teams found their equipment and notes arranged in the same geometric patterns that had characterized Hartwell's disappearance 18 years earlier. A peculiar detail noted by the rescue team was that the expedition's supplies, food, water, and lamp oil, appeared to have been consumed over a period far longer than the 4 days the team had been in the cave. Following Webb's disappearance, the cave was unofficially avoided by local residents, though no official restrictions were placed on access. This changed in 1923 when the National Speleological Society organized a comprehensive survey intended to definitively map the cave system and explain the previous disappearances through modern scientific methods. The 1923 expedition, led by Dr. Sarah Catherine Morris of the Smithsonian Institution, represented the most sophisticated attempt to understand Endless Echo's anomalous properties. Dr. Morris brought a team of 12 specialists, including geologists, acoustics experts, and psychologists trained in studying the effects of prolonged underground isolation. The team established an elaborate communication system using telephone lines run from the cave entrance to prevent the communication failures that had plagued previous expeditions. They documented their findings through daily reports transmitted to colleagues at the surface, creating a detailed record of their experiences that provides the most comprehensive documentation of the cave's effects on human psychology and perception. Dr. Morris's initial reports describe standard cave formations with some unusual acoustic properties. However, by the 4th day underground, her team began reporting experiences that defied logical explanation. Team members have begun hearing conversations in chambers we know to be empty, Morris reported via telephone. The sound appears to originate from solid rock faces, and several team members insist they recognize the voices as belonging to previous expedition members, despite the impossibility of such a claim. More troubling were reports of visual phenomena that suggested the cave's geography was somehow unstable. Chambers we mapped yesterday appear to have changed configuration overnight, Morris documented. Passages that led to dead ends now open onto rooms we have never seen before. Our maps, drawn with careful precision, no longer match the physical reality we observe. The expedition's psychologist, Dr. Franklin Hayes, noted progressive changes in team behavior that followed a disturbing pattern. Extended exposure to the cave environment produces a form of dissociation that begins with mild disorientation and progresses to complete detachment from normal temporal awareness, Hayes observed. Team members lose track of time, report experiencing memories that belong to other people, and demonstrate an increasing reluctance to return to the surface. Dr. Morris's final transmission, received on the 7th day of the expedition, consisted of a single cryptic message. "We have found the source. The cave has been calling its own home for centuries. We understand now why people disappear. They don't vanish. They simply find where they belong." When rescue teams entered the cave 48 hours later, they found only the expedition's equipment, once again arranged in the geometric patterns that had become characteristic of disappearances at Endless Echo. However, this time investigators discovered something new. Carved into the limestone wall of the deepest explored chamber was a message in Dr. Morris's handwriting that read, "Time moves differently here. What seems like days below equals moments above. We are not lost. We are home." The most recent disappearance occurred in 2019, when digital technology finally allowed researchers to document the cave's anomalous properties with unprecedented precision. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a physicist specializing in acoustic phenomena, entered the cave with equipment designed to measure the sound anomalies that had been reported for over a century. Rodriguez wore body cameras and maintained constant GPS tracking while exploring the cave system during optimal atmospheric conditions. Her equipment recorded data that contradicted every known principle of physics and geology. GPS readings showed her moving through areas that existed hundreds of feet outside the mountain's actual boundaries. Her cameras recorded chambers with architectural features that suggested human construction, despite being formed entirely through natural geological processes. Most significantly, Rodriguez's final recordings captured clear audio of voices speaking in languages that linguistic experts have been unable to identify. Analysis of the sound waves revealed impossible acoustic properties, voices that seemed to originate from multiple locations simultaneously, and frequencies that suggested the speakers possessed vocal apparatus unlike human anatomy. Rodriguez's body camera footage ends abruptly after she enters a chamber that her GPS shows existing in the same physical space as the mountain's summit. The final image shows a vast underground space filled with what appears to be hundreds of people sitting in carved stone amphitheater seating, all staring directly at the camera with expressions of profound peace and contentment. The footage suggests these individuals represent the accumulated disappearances from over a century of vanishings, men and women of different eras, all apparently existing in the cave's impossible geography. Before the camera fails, Rodriguez's voice can be heard saying, "I understand now. The cave doesn't take people, it reveals where they've always belonged." Today, Endless Echo remains accessible to the public, though the Forest Service has posted warnings about the dangerous atmospheric conditions that correlate with disappearances. Local weather monitoring stations now track barometric pressure in the area, and automated warning systems alert authorities when conditions match the pattern associated with previous vanishings. Despite these precautions, people continue to disappear. The cave seems to call most strongly to those with scientific or academic backgrounds, researchers, geologists, and academics who approach it with the intention of solving its mysteries. Local residents report that on nights when atmospheric pressure drops below the critical threshold, they can hear voices echoing from the cave entrance, conversations in unknown languages, sounds of celebration, and what some describe as the most beautiful singing they have ever heard. The final piece of evidence came in 2021 when ground-penetrating radar revealed that the cave system extends far beyond what surface geology should allow. The scans show chambers reaching depths that would place them below sea level, spanning horizontal distances that exceed the mountain's footprint by several miles. Most puzzling are readings that suggest the deepest chambers contain large numbers of heat signatures consistent with human presence, despite the impossibility of accessing these areas through any known passage. Perhaps most disturbing is the pattern observed by researchers monitoring the cave entrance with infrared cameras. On nights when atmospheric conditions are optimal, the cameras record what appears to be people entering the cave who are never seen leaving. These figures, visible only on infrared as heat signatures, seem to include individuals wearing period clothing from different historical eras, suggesting that the cave's influence extends beyond simple temporal boundaries. The Cherokee elders from nearby reservations have begun speaking more openly about their ancestral knowledge of the cave, sharing oral traditions that describe it as a place where the world grows thin and those who hear the mountain's true voice find their way home to the first place. These traditions suggest that Endless Echo is not simply a cave, but rather a threshold, a point where multiple realities converge, and where the boundary between the world of the living and the realm of eternal memory becomes permeable. As investigations continue, one fact remains consistent. Those who enter Endless Echo during atmospheric pressure drops below 29.80 inches of mercury are not merely disappearing. According to every piece of evidence collected over 150 years of documentation, they are finding exactly where they have always belonged, in a place that exists between worlds, where time moves differently, and where the mountain itself provides shelter for those who hear its ancient calling. The events at Devil's Throat Cave in southeastern Kentucky represent perhaps the most comprehensively documented yet inexplicable disappearance in Appalachian history. Unlike isolated incidents or folk tales passed down through generations, this case unfolded under the watchful eyes of multiple investigators, government officials, and scientific observers, making its ultimate resolution all the more disturbing. The cave system itself had been known to local Cherokee populations for centuries before European settlement. Tribal records, translated in the 1960s by anthropologist Dr. Sarah Whitman, consistently referred to the location as the place where the earth breathes backward, a phrase that would prove eerily prophetic. The Cherokee avoided the cave entirely, considering it a boundary between the world of the living and what they called the hungry dark. European settlers first documented Devil's Throat in 1847 when surveyor Marcus Caldwell noted its unusual acoustic properties in his official territorial maps. Caldwell described the cave entrance as a natural cathedral of stone with an opening roughly 30 feet wide and 20 feet high. What distinguished Devil's Throat from thousands of other Appalachian caves was its distinctive sound signature. Even from the entrance, visitors could hear what Caldwell termed a continuous exhalation, as though the mountain itself were breathing. The cave remained largely unexplored until the spring of 1923, when the newly formed Kentucky Geological Survey dispatched a team to map the extensive cave systems throughout the region. Led by Dr. Harrison Mills, a respected geologist from the University of Kentucky, the expedition was intended as a routine cataloging mission that would enhance understanding of the region's limestone formations and underground water systems. Dr. Mills assembled a team of 6 specialists: cartographer James Morton, photographer William Chen, biologist Dr. Ruth Kensington, and 3 graduate students, Thomas Hartley, Margaret Webb, and David Liu. All were experienced cavers with extensive documentation of previous expeditions. Their planned 3-day survey was designed to create the first comprehensive map of Devil's Throat's interior passages. The team established their base camp on April 15th, approximately 200 yards from the cave entrance. Local residents from the nearby settlement of Bone Gap watched the scientists with obvious unease. Several elderly residents approached Dr. Mills directly, warning him that the mountain don't like visitors, and that previous attempts to explore the cave had ended poorly. Mills documented these concerns in his field journal, but dismissed them as typical mountain superstition. Initial exploration proceeded normally. The entrance chamber was massive, roughly the size of a small church, with multiple passages branching deeper into the mountain. The team noted unusual mineral formations that didn't match typical limestone cave geology. Chen's photographs revealed crystalline structures that seemed to emit a faint phosphorescent glow, though this phenomenon didn't appear in his developed images later. Dr. Kensington documented the complete absence of typical cave fauna. No bats, no insects, no evidence of any animal life whatsoever. The silence within the cave was so profound that team members reported feeling pressure in their ears, as though they were at significant altitude rather than underground. Most unsettling was the air movement. Despite the cave's depth and complexity, air flowed consistently outward from the deepest passages, carrying a metallic scent that reminded several team members of blood. On their second day, the team discovered what Morton termed the spiral chamber, a vast circular room approximately 100 feet in diameter. The chamber's most remarkable feature was a perfectly symmetrical spiral pattern carved into the floor, descending toward a central depression. The carving appeared ancient, predating any known indigenous stonework in the region, yet showed no signs of weathering despite the cave's obvious age. At the center of the spiral lay an opening approximately 6 feet in diameter, descending into absolute darkness. The team's equipment couldn't determine the depth of this central shaft. Dropped stones never produced an audible impact, and their brightest lanterns failed to illuminate the bottom. Most disturbing was the sound emanating from the opening, a rhythmic pulsing that Dr. Mills described as breathing amplified 1,000-fold. Margaret Webb, the expedition's most experienced climber, volunteered to descend into the central shaft using ropes and equipment. Her descent was carefully documented by Morton, who noted that Webb's lantern light became progressively dimmer as she descended, not due to distance, but as though the darkness itself was absorbing the illumination. At approximately 50 feet down, Webb's light vanished entirely, though she continued calling up to confirm her safety. Webb's final transmission, recorded in Dr. Mills's journal, was reported as follows. "The walls down here aren't stone. They're warm and they're moving. There's something massive down here, something that's been waiting. I can see lights that aren't lights and voices that aren't speaking. Oh God, it's beautiful. It's calling to all of us. We've been invited home." The rope went slack. When the team pulled it up, they found only Margaret Webb's empty harness, still securely fastened, but with no indication of how she had exited it. More troubling, the rope showed no signs of cutting or fraying. It was as though Webb had simply vanished from her equipment while suspended in the darkness. The remaining team members immediately initiated emergency protocols. Dr. Mills sent Thomas Hartley to the surface to contact local authorities, while the others established a perimeter around the central shaft. However, over the following hours, Each team member began reporting the same phenomenon Webb had described. They heard voices calling from the depths, voices that sounded exactly like their own, but speaking words they hadn't said. David Liu was the next to disappear. Morton documented that Liu had been sitting only 3 feet away when he simply stood up, walked to the edge of the shaft, and stepped into the darkness without any apparent distress or unusual behavior. Liu's final words, spoken calmly, as though commenting on the weather, were recorded as, "Of course. We've always been expected. I can see the way now." Dr. Mills made the decision to evacuate the remaining team immediately. However, as they gathered their equipment, they discovered that their carefully marked route to the surface no longer existed. The passages they had mapped and documented over 2 days had somehow reconfigured. Where familiar chambers had been, they found blank stone walls. Morton's detailed maps indicated corridors that now led to solid rock faces. William Chen documented their increasingly desperate attempts to find the surface. His photographs from this period, developed later, showed inexplicable anomalies. Images of his teammates revealed additional figures standing behind them, figures that none of the team members remembered seeing. More disturbing, in several photographs, Chen captured images of Margaret Webb and David Liu apparently walking alongside the group, though both had already vanished into the central shaft. Dr. Ruth Kensington began experiencing what she termed temporal displacement. She reported having vivid memories of conversations and events that hadn't yet occurred, including detailed recollections of finding the surface exit and returning safely to the university. These false memories were so convincing that she repeatedly insisted they had already escaped the cave and were currently safe in their campus offices. The final entry in Dr. Mills's journal, dated April 18th, reads, "The distinction between memory and anticipation has collapsed entirely. I can remember our successful return, our published papers, our continued careers. Simultaneously, I can remember walking into the shaft, descending into the warm darkness, joining the vast presence that waits below. Both memories are equally vivid, equally true. The cave isn't just a physical space, it's a nexus where all possible outcomes exist simultaneously. We chose to come here, we chose to stay, we chose to leave. All choices are true, all outcomes are reality." Thomas Hartley reached the surface on April 16th and immediately contacted both local law enforcement and the University of Kentucky. A rescue operation was mounted within hours, involving state police, experienced local cavers, and emergency medical personnel. When the rescue team entered Devil's Throat Cave, they found the spiral chamber exactly as Dr. Mills had described, including the central shaft and the mysterious carved spiral. However, they found no trace of the missing team members. All equipment had been left behind in perfect order, as though the team had simply evaporated from their work site. Most puzzling, Morton's maps and documentation were discovered to be completely accurate, detailing passages and chambers that the rescue team could verify. Yet somehow, 5 people had vanished from a thoroughly mapped and monitored location. The rescue team's own experience in the cave proved equally unsettling. Multiple team members reported hearing familiar voices calling from the central shaft, voices that sounded exactly like the missing researchers. Electronic equipment malfunctioned consistently, with compasses spinning randomly and radios producing only static interspersed with what sounded like distant conversations in languages no team member recognized. Most disturbing was the discovery made by rescue team leader Captain Robert Hayes. While examining the central shaft with high-powered searchlights, Hayes reported seeing movement in the depths, figures walking along passages that shouldn't exist, carrying lanterns that don't cast light. These figures, according to Hayes's official report, appeared to be Dr. Mills's team, calmly continuing their research in chambers that existed far below the reach of any equipment. Federal investigators arrived within the week, sealing off Devil's Throat Cave and classifying the incident under national security provisions. The official explanation cited geological instability and hazardous atmospheric conditions, though no scientific evidence supported these claims. Local residents were relocated from Bone Gap under eminent domain proceedings, and the entire area was declared a restricted zone. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a specialist in acoustic phenomena from MIT, was granted limited access to study the cave in 1954. Her classified research report, declassified in 1994, revealed extraordinary findings. The cave's acoustic properties were unlike anything in known geology. Sound waves entered the cave, but never emerged, as though being absorbed by the stone itself. More significantly, Morrison's equipment detected sound patterns emanating from the central shaft that resembled human speech, though no words could be distinguished. Morrison's final recommendation was immediate and permanent closure of the site. Her report concluded, "The Devil's Throat Cave system exhibits properties that challenge fundamental understanding of physics and acoustics. The disappearance of Dr. Mills's team cannot be explained through conventional means. Whatever phenomenon exists within this location poses risks to both individual safety and scientific understanding that cannot be adequately contained or studied." The cave remains sealed today, though hikers occasionally report unusual phenomena in the surrounding area. Voices carry impossibly far through the mountains near the sealed entrance. Electronic devices malfunction. Most troubling, several visitors have reported encountering members of Dr. Mills's research team, appearing exactly as they did in 1923, calmly conducting their geological survey as though no time had passed. Local folklore has evolved around these sightings. Residents of nearby communities speak of the eternal expedition, a research team trapped between departure and arrival, continuing their work in a space that exists outside normal time. Whether these accounts represent psychological projection, local mythology, or something more disturbing remains officially undetermined. What cannot be disputed is that 5 highly qualified scientists entered Devil's Throat Cave in April 1923 and never emerged, despite exhaustive rescue efforts and federal investigation. Their fate remains one of Appalachia's most thoroughly documented yet inexplicable mysteries, a reminder that some spaces in these ancient mountains operate according to rules that human understanding has yet to comprehend. In the winter of 1947, Dr. Catherine Morse of the University of Virginia received an urgent telegram from the small mining community of Ember Hollow, West Virginia. The message was brief but compelling. University assistance required. Cave expedition overdue. Local authorities insufficient. What Dr. Morse discovered upon her arrival would challenge everything she understood about human behavior, geological phenomena, and the boundaries between scientific observation and supernatural occurrence. Ember Hollow had existed for nearly 70 years as a modest coal mining settlement, nestled in a valley so remote that even today cellular service remains sporadic. The community of approximately 300 souls had always maintained an uneasy relationship with the limestone cave system that honeycombed the mountains surrounding their settlement. Local Cherokee oral traditions, documented by early missionaries, consistently described these formations as the breathing places where earth dreams, locations to be approached with caution and respect. The cave in question, known locally as Whispering Cavern, had acquired its name from the peculiar acoustic phenomena that occurred within its chambers. Even slight movements or conversations near the entrance would echo and distort, creating what residents described as conversations between unseen speakers. Mining engineer Robert Fitzgerald, who first mapped the entrance in 1923, noted in his survey report that the cave appears to possess natural amplification properties that exceed normal limestone acoustics by a considerable margin. Dr. Morse's initial investigation revealed that the missing expedition consisted of 12 individuals. 6 professional speleologists from the National Speleological Society, 3 local guides, 2 photographers documenting the cave system for National Geographic, and 1 Dr. James Whitmore, a geologist from Princeton University studying unusual mineral formations in Appalachian cave systems. This was not a casual exploration, but a serious scientific endeavor, equipped with the most advanced caving equipment available in 1947. The expedition had entered Whispering Cavern on November 15th, 1947, planning a 3-day comprehensive survey of the cave's extensive tunnel network. Local residents reported seeing their headlamp lights disappearing into the main entrance around dawn. By November the 18th, when the team failed to emerge as scheduled, search efforts commenced. Local miners, familiar with cave rescue techniques from their underground work, entered the cave system but found no trace of the missing group. What distinguished this disappearance from typical caving accidents was the complete absence of equipment or evidence. In cave emergencies, rescuers typically discover abandoned gear, evidence of cave-ins, or other indicators of the circumstances that led to the accident. Whispering Cavern revealed nothing. The searchers found the cave exactly as it had been before the expedition's entry, with no signs that 12 people had ever traversed its passages. Dr. Morse's investigation uncovered several disturbing patterns in the cave's history. Between 1923 and 1947, 14 separate incidents had occurred involving individuals or small groups entering Whispering Cavern and failing to return. Most had been attributed to mining accidents or simple disappearances, common enough occurrences in remote Appalachian communities that few questions were raised. However, when examined collectively, these incidents revealed troubling consistencies. Each disappearance had occurred during periods of what local meteorologists termed atmospheric pressure anomalies, unusual weather patterns that created significant barometric fluctuations. Furthermore, residents consistently reported hearing the calling in the days preceding each incident, a phenomenon described as distant voices echoing from the cave entrance, speaking in languages that sounded familiar but used words no one could quite understand. Martha Henley, whose husband had disappeared into the cave in 1943, provided Dr. Morse with a particularly detailed account. She described how Thomas had become increasingly drawn to the cave in the weeks before his disappearance, often walking to its entrance at dawn and standing motionless for hours. He said he could hear music down there, Martha told Dr. Morse. Beautiful music that made him remember things that hadn't happened yet. He started talking about going home, but we'd lived in Ember Hollow our whole lives. This was home. The geological characteristics of Whispering Cavern defied conventional understanding. Dr. Morse's surveys revealed a cave system that extended far deeper than typical limestone formations, with chambers that seemed to violate basic principles of structural geology. Most unsettling was the discovery of what she termed impossible architecture, passages that appeared to curve back on themselves in ways that her instruments couldn't properly map. Temperature readings within the cave proved equally anomalous. While the entrance maintained the typical 55-degree constant temperature of limestone caves, deeper passages showed fluctuations that corresponded to no known geological phenomena. More disturbing were the readings taken by Dr. Morse's electronic equipment, which detected electromagnetic anomalies that seemed to pulse in regular patterns, resembling a massive, slow heartbeat emanating from the cave's deepest accessible chambers. The acoustic properties that gave Whispering Cavern its name proved to be far more complex than simple echo effects. Dr. Morse's sound experiments revealed that voices spoken near the entrance would return minutes later, but altered in ways that suggested they had traveled much farther than the cave's mapped passages could account for. Most unsettling, these returning echoes occasionally contained additional voices that hadn't been part of the original sounds. Local folklore provided additional context that Dr. Morse initially dismissed but eventually found impossible to ignore. Ember Hollow residents spoke of the gathering, a phenomenon that occurred roughly every 7 years when the cave would call its own. During these periods, typically lasting several weeks, sensitive individuals would report dreams of vast underground chambers filled with people from all eras of the region's history: Cherokee hunters, early settlers, Civil War soldiers, and modern miners, all walking together towards some indiscernible destination deep within the earth. Dr. Morse's most significant discovery came during her final exploration of the cave system. Using newly developed portable sound equipment, she detected what appeared to be human voices emanating from chambers beyond the reach of her mapping instruments. The recordings, when analyzed later at the University of Virginia, revealed voices speaking in multiple languages and dialects spanning centuries. Most chilling was the clear identification of Dr. James Whitmore's voice among the recordings, despite the fact that he had been missing for over 2 months. The voices spoke of wonders beyond the reach of surface dwellers, of cities built in harmony with the earth's deep rhythms, and of a purpose that transcended individual human existence. They described their underground existence not as imprisonment, but as fulfillment, as though they had found something in the depths that surface life could never provide. Dr. Whitmore's voice, when isolated from the others, spoke of geological formations that demonstrated conscious design, of mineral patterns that suggested intelligence, and of a vast entity that had been shaping the cave system for millennia. Dr. Morse's final report, classified by the federal government until 1987, concluded that Whispering Cavern represented a phenomenon beyond current scientific understanding. She recommended immediate closure of the cave and ongoing monitoring by qualified personnel. Her personal notes, discovered after her death in 1983, revealed her own growing obsession with the cave's mysteries and her increasing conviction that the missing individuals had not died but had instead discovered something that humanity was not yet ready to comprehend. The cave was officially sealed in 1948, though local residents report that the barriers have been mysteriously breached on multiple occasions. Ember Hollow itself has gradually diminished, with families moving away and fewer newcomers arriving to replace them. Today, fewer than 50 people remain in the settlement, most of them elderly residents who speak reluctantly of the cave and its influence on their community. Recent developments have renewed interest in Whispering Cavern. Seismologists have detected unusual activity emanating from the sealed cave system, rhythmic vibrations that seem to correspond to the electromagnetic anomalies Dr. Morse documented decades earlier. Most significantly, hikers in the area report hearing voices calling from within the mountain, voices that sound like friends, and family members inviting them to explore the hidden passages that still connect to the sealed chambers. The fate of the 1947 expedition remains officially unexplained, though Dr. Morse's classified files contain references to evidence she was forbidden to include in her public reports. What that evidence might have revealed about the nature of Whispering Cavern and the ultimate destiny of those who entered its depths remains locked away, waiting for someone with the courage and clearance to examine the complete record of one of Appalachia's most disturbing mysteries. Local authorities continue to maintain restricted access to the cave entrance, though their primary concern appears to be preventing others from sharing the fate of the missing rather than conducting further investigation. The mountains keep their secrets well, and some doors, once opened, reveal truths that perhaps should remain hidden in the darkness where they belong. I remember when the McHenry family car was found abandoned on October Ridge Road, headlights still on, engine running, driver's door hanging open as if someone had stepped out intending to return in just a moment. That was 3 days after they'd entered Widow's Hollow Cave, 3 days after 5 people walked into the mountain and simply never walked back out. The investigation began immediately, but what they found defied every rational explanation. Inside the cave, the family's footprints were perfectly preserved in the mud for exactly 47 steps before vanishing entirely, not fading gradually or becoming obscured by natural processes, but stopping abruptly as if the McHenrys had simply evaporated into the limestone walls. No signs of struggle, no alternative passages, no indication of where 5 human beings could have possibly gone in a cave system that dead-ended less than 60 feet from the entrance. Local authorities initially suspected foul play, but forensic analysis revealed something far more unsettling. The footprints didn't just stop, they stopped in a perfect line, all 5 family members' tracks ending at precisely the same distance from the cave mouth. Even more disturbing was the discovery that beyond that 47-step threshold, the cave floor showed no signs of human passage for what appeared to be decades, despite being easily accessible and thoroughly mapped by spelunkers. Dr. Sarah Chen, a geologist from West Virginia University, conducted the first comprehensive study of Widow's Hollow in 1997, 3 years after the McHenry disappearance. Her findings painted a picture of a cave system that shouldn't exist according to conventional geological principles. The limestone formations showed evidence of being carved by water flow, yet no underground stream had ever been documented in the area. More puzzling were the acoustic properties she discovered during her investigation. Sound behaves differently in there, Dr. Chen noted in her research journal. Whispers carry for hundreds of feet, while shouts seem to be absorbed entirely. We documented instances where team members standing 10 feet apart couldn't hear each other speaking normally, but could clearly perceive conversations happening much deeper in the cave system. Her team also recorded what they described as rhythmic tapping sounds emanating from deep within the mountain, though no source could be identified. The McHenry family had been experienced cavers, not the type to take unnecessary risks or venture unprepared into unknown territory. Thomas McHenry had been exploring Appalachian cave systems for over 20 years, often bringing his wife, Patricia, and their 3 children along on carefully planned expeditions. They carried proper equipment, informed others of their plans, and had explored Widow's Hollow twice before without incident. What made their final journey different remains one of the investigation's most troubling mysteries. Local resident Emma Caldwell, whose property borders the cave entrance, provided the only eyewitness account of the family's arrival. She reported seeing their vehicle parked at the trailhead around noon on October 15th, with all 5 family members unloading their gear in what appeared to be their usual methodical fashion. Nothing seemed unusual about their behavior or equipment, and the weather conditions were ideal for caving. What Mrs. Caldwell remembered most vividly, however, was the sound. Right around sunset, maybe 6:30 or so, I heard the most beautiful singing coming from the direction of the cave, she told investigators. It wasn't the McHenrys. I knew their voices. This was something else entirely, like a choir, but the voices seemed to be coming from inside the mountain itself. I'd never heard anything like it before, and I've lived next to that cave for 37 years. When search and rescue teams entered Widow's Hollow the following morning, they found the cave in pristine condition. No equipment had been left behind, no signs of distress or emergency. The family's backpacks, helmets, and lighting equipment had simply vanished along with their owners. Even more peculiar was the condition of the cave floor beyond the 47-step mark. It appeared to have been recently swept clean, with no debris, footprints, or disturbances of any kind. The investigation attracted attention from federal authorities when similar disappearances in other Appalachian cave systems came to light. Between 1989 and 2004, 17 separate incidents had been documented across West Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, all sharing identical characteristics. Experienced cavers entering well-known cave systems and vanishing without a trace, their footprints ending at specific distances from cave entrances, and no evidence of their passage beyond those termination points. Agent Patricia Morrison of the FBI's Missing Persons Unit spent 6 months investigating what came to be known as the Appalachian cave disappearances. Her classified report, obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests years later, revealed patterns that suggested something far more complex than isolated incidents. Each disappearance occurred during specific lunar phases, always within 48 hours of the new moon. Each cave system showed similar acoustic anomalies and geological inconsistencies. Most disturbing of all, each site exhibited what Morrison described as temporal displacement characteristics. We found evidence suggesting that time moves differently within these cave systems, Morrison wrote in her final report. Equipment left at various depths showed inconsistent rates of battery drain, with devices placed deeper in the caves maintaining power far longer than should be physically possible. Temperature readings fluctuated in patterns that defied thermodynamic principles, and several team members reported experiencing significant time distortion during their investigations. The breakthrough in understanding Widow's Hollow came from an unexpected source: historical records from the Cherokee Nation. Tribal elder Joseph Running Bear, whose ancestors had lived in the region for centuries before European settlement, provided oral histories that painted a very different picture of these cave systems. According to Cherokee tradition, certain caves in the Appalachian Mountains served as gateways to what they called the Twilight Lands, parallel realms where the ancestors continued their existence after death. Our people always knew those places were dangerous, Running Bear explained to investigators. The caves that sing are not meant for the living. Those who enter during the dark moon sometimes hear the voices of those who went before, and if they listen too long, they forget which world they belong to. The Cherokee had developed elaborate rituals and restrictions around these sites, treating them as sacred locations that required careful respect and specific protocols to approach safely. These traditions aligned remarkably with the investigation's findings. The caves where disappearances occurred were all located on land that had once been considered sacred by various Native American tribes. Archaeological evidence suggested these sites had been used for ceremonial purposes for thousands of years, with artifacts found indicating complex spiritual practices centered around communication with the deceased. Dr. Elizabeth Santos, an anthropologist specializing in indigenous spiritual practices, spent 2 years studying the cultural context surrounding these cave systems. Her research revealed a consistent pattern of beliefs across multiple tribal groups, all recognizing certain caves as portals between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. According to these traditions, the caves required offerings and specific ritualistic approaches to navigate safely, and those who entered without proper preparation risked becoming lost between worlds. What we're seeing may not be disappearances in the conventional sense, Dr. Santos theorized in her published research. These could be instances where individuals have unknowingly crossed into parallel dimensional spaces that indigenous peoples have recognized and respected for millennia. The fact that footprints end at specific distances suggests these transition points are fixed geographical features rather than random phenomena. Modern attempts to explore beyond the 47-step threshold in Widow's Hollow have yielded increasingly disturbing results. In 2008, a team of professional spelunkers equipped with advanced recording equipment managed to penetrate deeper into the cave system than any previous expedition. Their video footage, analyzed frame by experts, shows something that challenges conventional understanding of physical reality. Beyond the point where the McHenry footprints ended, the cave appears to extend infinitely into darkness. The team's powerful LED lights, capable of illuminating objects hundreds of feet away, simply disappeared into an absolute void that seemed to absorb light itself. More unsettling was the audio captured during this expedition. Clear recordings of human voices calling from impossible distances within the cave, speaking words and languages that linguistic experts couldn't identify. The most disturbing element of the 2008 expedition footage was discovered only during computer enhancement of the audio track. Buried beneath hours of ambient cave sounds, analysis revealed what appeared to be Thomas McHenry's voice calling for help. The recording was made 14 years after his disappearance, and voice analysis confirmed a 93% probability match. The implications of this discovery forced authorities to seal Widow's Hollow indefinitely. Today, Widow's Hollow Cave remains closed to the public, its entrance secured by steel barriers and warning signs. Official explanations cite geological instability and safety concerns, but local residents know the truth runs much deeper. The mountain still sings on certain nights, and those brave enough or foolish enough to approach the sealed entrance sometimes report hearing familiar voices calling from within the earth, speaking the names of loved ones with perfect clarity. Recent satellite imagery has revealed something that may explain the McHenry family's fate. Advanced ground-penetrating radar shows that Widow's Hollow connects to a vast network of natural chambers extending deep beneath the Appalachian ridge system. These chambers appear to follow geological patterns that shouldn't exist, creating spaces where normal physical laws may not apply. The Cherokee were right about one thing. Some places in these ancient mountains exist between worlds, and those who enter without understanding may find themselves lost in spaces that exist outside of time itself. The McHenry family may not be gone in the way we understand disappearance. They may simply be elsewhere, in a realm that touches our world only in specific places during specific times, calling out to anyone willing to listen for help that may never come. And in Widow's Hollow Cave, their footprints remain perfectly preserved, marking the exact spot where our world ends and something else begins.